Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of InterSTEM Talks. Today I'm joined by Mana and Gordon.
Hi, I'm Mana. I'm a rising senior at Los Altos High School, and I'm super excited to talk to you guys about this podcast session's topic. Yeah.
Hey guys, it's been a really long while and I am excited to be back. I had a good summer, so right now I'm hyped, I'm energized finally. So hopefully we can have a great podcast session today.
Yeah, by the way, just as an introduction to the podcast, I guess, since it's been a little bit of a break for us here at InterSTEM Talks, what have you guys been doing during the summer?
For me, it's binging Criminal Minds. I started watching it during summer and my God, it is an amazing show. It's great. And yeah, overall just starting to prepare because we're all applying to college. That is, oh my
Yay.
goodness, that is something that's on all our minds, I'm pretty sure. So yeah,
Don't
pretty intense
remind me,
stuff.
Gordon. Don't remind me. This is a really tough time for, I think, all of us rising seniors who are
I
applying to
know.
colleges. It's been a struggle, but just one more semester and we're done.
Yeah, it's like so hard.
I've been in Boston for a good 4 weeks now. I'm at a summer program. It's pretty good here. I'm enjoying it. And yeah, I'm learning a lot. So, how about you, Andre?
I've also been like trying to relax, so that's what I've been mostly doing in July. But then now, all of a sudden, these college essays are creeping up on me, and like I believe tomorrow, which since we're recording this podcast session a few weeks before it'll be released, tomorrow will be August 1st, and that's when the Common App and UC applications will open to be able to like put in our information and like essays and activities and even submit. So that part is kind of scary because it's just starting. But all of that being said, in June I did a UCI and UCLA program. Those are all really interesting, related to like medicine. And then in July, it's been really hot. How's the weather been for you guys?
Oh, it's been
Yeah, dude.
awful over here.
It's like so crazy. It's like, oh my, I can't even go on runs anymore. Which is like, dude, I love running. Everybody knows I love running. Like, dude, I can't do it in that heat. Like one time I was running, it's like my legs started like feeling like really hurting. I was like, that's not normal because it's supposed to be sore, not a pain.
And
So
I feel
it's
like definitely I have stopped pretty much all physical activity. And I feel like every week is getting progressively worse in the summer. And it's becoming a pretty big problem.
yeah.
Actually, now that you mentioned of that, that's a good segue into like the first topic. So I haven't even introduced what we're going to really be talking about formally today. We want to focus on new and emerging STEM fields that we think are going to be coming to fruition shortly, or like as we're talking, they're going online. So the first topic that I was thinking of was the like interdisciplinary fields between climate conservation and mechanical engineering. So what I mean more specifically is I don't know if you probably have heard of it. It's in the media very often about carbon capture and different machinery that is being innovated on and like refined in order to basically suck carbon out of the air and then I believe store it underground. There's like 19 in the world right now, which is very little considering how many probably like I don't quote me, but probably billions of metric tons of carbon we have in the atmosphere. Um, the problem is right now it's not very feasible. It's very expensive to make these. There's like massive vacuums that are like the size of huge factory buildings, like in the middle of nowhere. So they're kind of an eyesore too, very expensive to make, and the technology isn't quite ready yet. But the reason I consider it like a new and emerging field is because there's a lot to be done in this area, number one. And number two, if the technology has just started at this point and we already have 19 like plants around the world, I think that there's a lot more interesting ways to take carbon out of the atmosphere, I guess, and like remove pollutants. I think it's also really interesting. Like people are going to be broadly talking about this in like a logistical sense, like not just how do we get this technology sufficient and like feasible, but also where do we put it? Like, do we want to put it right next to a factory, or do we want to put it in the middle of like rural Fresno in California or like rural South Dakota? Like, where do we want to place it? I think there's a lot of questions to be unanswered here. And sorry, this is me really going on a tangent here, but there's also some new like government things going on right now relating to climate, and there's actually a bill right now, interestingly titled "Nothing to Do with Climate." That's not the title, but the title is Inflation Reduction Act. Has nothing to do with climate, I guess, but actually half of the funds in that bill are going to go to like record climate funds, and it's supposedly going to help reach goals set by the US to reduce emissions 40%, I think, by 2030 from 2005 levels. And that's actually a big deal because the goal is like 50%. So that would give us a lot more leeway in actually being able to maybe meet some of those goals. Anyway, I'm going on a really long tangent here. I want to hear what you guys think about this field.
I think it's absolutely fascinating that, first of all, you can even suck carbon out of the air. I didn't know that was a thing. But it's also interesting to see how the narrative has shifted from how do we stop putting carbon in the air and to now how do we like actively remove it. So it's a lot less theoretical now, and now we're actually seeing new things like what was it called? Carbon capture?
Yeah,
What's it
carbon
called? Yeah,
capture.
carbon capture. Um, and we're starting to see these physical concrete, factories and innovations starting to make active changes, which I think is pretty cool. Um,
Wait, yeah, that's like really interesting. Really quick, do you know like how they do it? Because like, do they like use like some sort of carbon magnet or something? Like, how do they get it out of the air?
Well, I actually don't know, but what I will do is really quickly, frantically type on my computer because I don't know the answer. Let's see what Google says actually, so that we can all kind of know. Okay, so what Google randomly showed, or like showed to me on Cosmos website, I guess, Cosmos magazine, is an air stripper. Wait. An air separator strips oxygen from the atmosphere, which produces a stream of oxygen gas, and then that goes into something called a gasifier, which bakes coal at 700 degrees Celsius, which is, wow, a lot, um, and releases hydrogen, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and steam. That's known as syngas, I think, is how you might pronounce it. And then you add water into the syngas to convert it into hydrogen and CO2, and then CO2 is dehydrated and put into a liquid form for transport and storage. So there's the very long explanation that I just BS'd by looking at Google.
Dang, okay, so that's actually pretty cool because like you can like make it liquid and that'll be easier. Because I thought they were like grabbing just like gas, which was a lot harder than just liquid.
I mean, essentially, if we want to like make it sound cool, that's basically what's going on. Um, yeah, it's very interesting. Another thing, though, that I hope this doesn't become is I hope that like entities or like companies or even like everyday people kind of use this as an excuse, like let's just like continue on with our lives and pretend nothing is going on and just fully rely on these machines. Like that's a little bit of a problem because even if we are able to make them much more innovative and effective through like this new emerging field, it's not the only way to reduce, like emissions, and that's going to be a problem. So it's like one of the many tools in a toolkit that can be used.
Definitely. It's about like not only finding these solutions, but also changing the mindset of people who think that, oh, we can get away with this when we really can't long term. And speaking of things that we hope this project would accomplish, I'm hoping that it is not a quick short term project. I know a lot of these solutions are sometimes very new, innovative, and people get really excited, and then the project stops 10 years later, and we've pretty much made no progress. So it'd be good if we can definitely stay committed to a solution, while also educating people on, how not to worsen the situation that we're in right now.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like some people are just gonna like drop it. Like it's like, all right, it's not cool anymore. That's
Yeah.
not gonna be good.
And unfortunately, that's not just an issue with climate change science, but a lot of different types of science as well. Biology, chemistry, physics, people want new and exciting things when sometimes you just have to stick with one thing and really make progress on it.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of examples with that. Like one that comes to mind, yeah, kind of STEM related, is Hyperloop. If you guys have heard of that, this like really fancy concept to travel 700 miles per hour from like LA to San Francisco, or some distance that would normally take an hour by airplane or like 7 hours by train or by car, and reduce that to like an hour in Hyperloop. So like same time as airplane, but you're traveling like kind of in a train. It's like in a closed tube that you just go at really fast speeds, not having to check in at an airport, all that. But number one, how do you make that like a project that can actually reach its goals of 700 miles? I think, yeah, I agree that that plays into this carbon capture field and conversation.
Yeah, it has to be scalable, and hopefully these carbon capture, uh, would it be considered machines, innovation? I'm not really sure, but hopefully it'll play out well long term. That's it's definitely a fascinating idea.
Yeah, actually, there's a lot of other like different machinery that's being developed right now. One of them is like, or not machinery, but just experiments in really complicated settings of machinery. Where I'm going with this is I'm kind of thinking of like astronomy, and when we think of the International Space Station or like a Falcon 9 rocket or a really advanced piece of like spacecraft or even unmanned spacecraft or something, our mind goes to like the fuel and the thrusters and the boosters may be needed to lift objects into orbit, take them out of orbit, take boosters like SpaceX is doing and making them reusable for other missions, taking them back to Earth. But there's a lot more things that you can do with astronomy, actually. And one thing that has been done recently and that I think has a lot more potential is conducting like experiments in the International Space Station. And so what has been done in the past couple decades, it's not new at all, is growing a bunch of leaf varieties, and where this could go in the future, potentially new species of plants and leafy greens and flowers, to see how those environments like in space might differ to be able to grow those foods or might stay the same. Yeah, what do you guys think about that?
That's actually a really cool field, and I remember watching a Netflix show. I'm completely am blanking on the name. I think it's Space Race or something like that. It actually stars Steve Carell for all of those Office fans out there. But it's a really funny show, and they actually in one episode talked about something called a lunar habitat, and in this habitat that they were kind of running simulations in, they grew a lot of potatoes, a whole lot of potatoes, and it was kind of just seeing how agriculture would fare in space. But it was also just an interesting experience to see, like genetic breeding and how our astronauts and people on the space station can maybe even grow their own food. So definitely nutrition and agriculture can play into astronomy, and it's kind of cool how those seemingly, field a field that's seemingly very not land oriented can have that aspect of.
Yeah. Overall, it sounds really cool, especially like I guess the space aspect of it, because I think like space is something that doesn't really get explored as much, and even though like a lot of research has been done on it, it's like having that sort of like interdisciplinary field is definitely it's really cool, honestly.
I think there's also another aspect to this, not just of like plants, but also like diets and maybe even cures to diseases and conditions. Because, for example, if we can take a treatment or a pesticide or a plant and explore with that in space, if we can do that first and like get it perfected in a space environment, maybe you can just take that onto Earth and then it's like perfect. So like your effectiveness rate is say 70% on the ISS, then maybe you'll be 85% on Earth. Why would we do that? Why would we first do clinical trials on a space station before Earth? I don't know. Maybe like in 100 years, people will find reason for that. But there's like interesting things that can be done for health, I think, and like a nutrition outlook that can lead to potentially new fields in the future. Um, Now, I've been talking a lot about like what I think the future might look like. I'm interested to hear what you guys think might appeal for different STEM fields.
I mean, I can just go. Dude, something that I'm like really interested in is seeing like how cloning is gonna develop, right? So, because like obviously like that the process of it is kind of like it's getting perfected a lot, and so I'm like really hyped to see a Jurassic Park in the future. I think that is something that I will for sure pay heavy money for. But yeah, on a more serious note though, it's gonna like obviously take a lot of moderation. So what I would think is like we'd probably have another job basically about like I guess moderation of both moderation and regulation of kind of like the results of cloning. Let's say if there is a big dinosaur theme park, like they're gonna need to check out like and see like if the cloning had any adverse effects on it, and if they need to go back to the drawing board with the cloning process. Let's say like an animal is like born diseased, like you need to be able to figure that out. But yeah, you guys interested in that type of stuff?
I think it's super cool. And I actually remember this is giving me flashbacks to one of our first podcast sessions. But I remember, Gordon, you were talking about Dolly and the sheep and cloning. And I was like, wow, this is a really interesting field that is kind of really far-fetched and, sci-fi and reminds me a lot of sci-fi. But it's becoming a reality really quickly. And I definitely think it's possible. But as you said, like, to be able to regulate it and find some sort of moderation, ethical, that's what bioethics is. I think that would be really interesting how it ties into cloning because it is a very interesting topic, that's for sure.
Dude, and it's for sure cool, dude. I mean, I would pay so much money to see a dinosaur. Just out of the blue thought right there.
100%.
I can't. I have faith in humanity that we won't bring back the dinosaurs because then maybe that will like cause a whole food chain crisis. But that would be pretty cool. Um, what I was gonna say, actually, Mana kind of hit it on the spot, was like bioethics and moderation, especially if this is being done with like pets or humans. Like
Oh,
people are gonna have like a larger conversation about that. Like no, it's a very interesting idea. Like, can we moderate people because they're cloned, and then the other people don't need to be like intensely put under surveillance? It's an interesting thought because maybe there's like side effects of cloning that require surveillance, but are like companies or government entities gonna abuse those powers? Are people gonna feel like their defining identity is that they were cloned? Like there's a lot of interesting, more ethical, even maybe philosophical questions about that, rather than like STEM technical questions. But it's very interesting. There's a lot of different ways you can go about that.
yeah.
So, one field that I personally am very interested in is computational biology. And I remember Andrea told me, hey guys, for this podcast session, think of some fun interdisciplinary fields. And this was the first one that kind of came into my mind, partly because number one, it's a very hot field right now, but also it's very interesting because we have so much biological data out there. We don't know, we know almost nothing about the body, but we have all this information that we get from clinical trials and experiments. And how do we kind of digest that information? That's what computational biology is. So, mapping neurons, like seeing how they talk to each other, how that kind of externally affects our behavior. It's just a very interesting field. And those of us who are interested in biology and computer science kind of go nuts at this topic. So yeah.
Sorry, could you repeat that? So like you were talking about like bioinformatics stuff or something?
Yeah.
It sounds like really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, thanks, Gordon, for bringing it up. But bioinformatics is very similar to computational biology. So bioinformatics is kind of gathering the data and being able to visualize it. And then computational biology is finding patterns in that data using programming and software. So it's definitely very cool. All of the visualizations that we can see, like those cool graphics that we can see online of proteins and how cells interact with each other, a lot of that is actually determined by computer modeling and simulations, which is pretty much what the field does.
I'm curious, actually.
Oh, okay. That sounds pretty nice.
I'm curious if like computational biology or bioinformatics overlaps with what's the word? Whenever there's drug development, so like I guess in pharmacology fields, or there's another word I can't think of, but like, do you know if computational biology can measure like drug to drug interactions or like potential conflicts there?
That's also another really interesting point because computational biology is very theoretical. In wet labs, you do actual experiments, you mix chemicals together. It's a very hands-on type work. For computational biology, it's you can almost model a simulation. So you can, as Andre said, take two drugs and somehow simulate how they will interact with each other using softwares such as like docking softwares, where you can take a molecule and see how it interacts with another one, even though you have pretty much no idea how it might act in reality, which is also very cool. And it's a very novel way to, develop drug therapeutics and potentially find a lot of solutions for a lot of problems. And when Gordon was talking about cloning, I was thinking, oh, this is something that could definitely be done via computational biology, or at least streamlined via this field. So yeah, it's very novel.
Because you said like computational biology is like you're trying to like find like patterns or like right. So yeah, that makes sense because like I was thinking like if there are like patterns between like animals, like that does make cloning a lot easier, especially like if you can like source a genome. It's just easy like that.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be molecular biology. Computational biology could be modeling like population changes, and more on a zoology note. You can map how animal populations might change over time. You can model it via a function that computational biology might be able to give you, and predict how, let's say, deer populations might be affected by wolf populations or stuff like that in zoos. So it's very interesting, and it's not all molecular.
Yeah.
I feel like the ability to like model these things for whatever it is, cloning or drug to drug interactions or any molecule interactions, regardless of what it is, it's like a bridge between theoretical and like actual, like a physical outcome of something, which I think can help, scientific innovation. Because when you're able to model something and show the masses, like, here's a pattern, here's the data, here's a model that shows that data and patterns, I think that helps, like, fund programs and help them, like, come to reality rather than just a concept. So I think that that's a really important part of the future, yeah.
Definitely, it really helps with communicating science to the public and those who might not necessarily understand like the very complicated science jargon. So um, that's another really great way that computational biology has helped us all out.
Yeah, I would be really interested, honestly, to learn like how it's helped us in the past, because that would be interesting to learn. Something I'd encourage any listeners to look up if they're curious about that. Do we have any other STEM topics?
Hmm. I'm not sure entirely if this is like kind of like a newer one. I think it is because maybe previous studies haven't been done on it, but it's anthrozoology, which is kind of like basically the study of like pets, if you will. And it's all that's happening is basically like we're studying kind of like the relationships that like animals and humans have, especially within modern day society. So we're not talking about the wilderness. I'm just talking about like, hey, like kind of like the social aspect and as well as the human aspect of the effects that animal has, especially on domestic life. But yeah, that one's you guys. I'm not entirely sure about that though. So
Well, I have an idea of like how it, in the future it will be common and more like a new and emerging fields. If you take anthrozoology and you combine that with cloning, like how does a cloned human or a cloned sheep react with a regular sheep? That would be pretty interesting, I think.
yeah, dude. I think that is kind of where it comes into play, and I guess it also could serve to like within a broader sense, like how do you domesticate like animals like nearly instantly? If that's a field that people are willing to pursue in the future, I think that holds a lot of promise.
And I know, Gordon, when the moment you said like human and animal interactions on a domestic scale, the first thing I thought of was how much I've been wanting a dog ever since I was young. And like I've read so many articles about how human and animal interactions in a domestic setting can actually really help out like the psychology of a human, and that has some great benefits that that those interactions have. So that's what I thought of when I thought of Anthony zoology. It's like how do interactions between humans and pets play into our behavior? So I think that's also pretty interesting.
I mean, I was mostly thinking, how can I domesticate like a crocodile or something? I want a pet like that.
Gordon's going
So
big game. We all see that.
You know,
yeah, dude.
Gordon, if you end up getting yourself a crocodile, just get me a llama and I'll be good. I'll be set. I really
Dude, of
want a pet
course,
llama.
dude. So yeah, if there are any scientists out there, can we like figure that part out, please?
No, actually, it's your task, Gordon.
God, what if? I mean, depend. All right, hopefully the careers line up and everything. I'll for sure do that.
Actually, it doesn't really relate. I'm not gonna try to fake my transition to it, but another emerging field that I thought is coming more into light, especially in the past 2 years, has been the transition between occupational health and mental health. For starters, occupational health is generally the umbrella term used for the professionals that someone will refer to when they are in a work setting. So, for example, if you have an injury or dispute, or I've even heard like some cases where like if you were in a toxic setting, namely like toxic materials or toxic like pollutants, like if you worked at an oil place or something and you were exposed to some dangerous chemical, it can go a lot of different directions. But generally, what I think will be interesting to see with occupational health is how that connects more with mental health, because in the past 2 years we've seen how like different current events can impact like a work environment and how the work environment changes. Those occupational health professionals also need to be ready to like adapt to how their connections or advice on mental health changes, because if someone goes from an in-person work setting to just online, and then they're given the same resources for mental health, I don't think it's like necessarily the best scenario. So I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, overall, I think it is like probably best to like have some sort of bridge between them because like as I said, both mental and occupational health are kind of like different, so it does require a lot of effort to kind of like make a connection between those. And I think that yeah, that is definitely going to be a challenge.
And you were talking about like occupational health. I don't know how many of you guys have heard of this organization called OSHA. It's like the occupational oh sorry, OSH. Shoot, wait, actually hold on.
I think it's OSHA.
If
Like
I is it
O
it's OSHA, right?
OS. It stands for Occupational Safety of Health Administration.
Health administration. Okay, okay. Because I found this good article that like can combine AI and occupational health. So I'm just gonna OSHA. So it stands for Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Um, and this organization is pretty much just helping keep workers in factories and other in-person environments safe and protected. And I think the interesting thing is that a lot of these workers are actually being replaced with robots. And uh, the automation of tasks through like the use of robots are removing these workers from potentially like hazardous or unsafe environments. So I thought it was also kind of cool how AI has played a role, AI and robotics has played a role in facilitating like occupational health standards, if that makes any sense. And speaking of AI, it's also a really great emerging field that a lot of today's youth are like really interested in. If you ask almost any hardcore computer scientists what they plan on doing in the future, it usually involves the answer of, oh, I am super interested in AIML, and I've taken several 3 to 4 courses on Coursera for it. And AIML is definitely a really cool field because it's revolutionizing the way that uh, we as humans interact with computers and how computers interact with us. So I guess one really cool example is GPT-3. It's a really cool software. It's a language processing software that basically can write an entire article just that mimics your writing style, just with a little bit of training data. And it's really great because if you don't want to write an essay for your English class, you just tell this software to do it, it'll do it. It'll sound like you and not your best friend who's, you know, a great writer. So yeah, it's a great software and it does have potential for spreading misinformation and doing some not so great things, but I just think that there's so many examples in AI that are super cool, super innovative, and also kind of sci-fi-y almost. Yeah, another really cool topic. What do you guys
Yeah.
think about AI?
Well, what was that called? GTP3? Was that right?
Yeah, super close. GPT-3.
GPT-3. Okay. If it was GTP-3, I think that's the name of a protein or like a molecule thing. Um, Anyways, I think it's really interesting. It reminds me of like next decade's Grammarly, maybe. Like, no,
Ooh, I see
we
that.
don't,
Yeah.
yeah, we don't need people to write essays anymore, which is a bit of a interesting idea. But I think there was like practical applications. Like when you're working, maybe not necessarily studying, but when you're working and need to like type something up really quickly and send it to someone, like especially think about in emergency scenarios, I guess. Like there are like documents, like formal things that need to be sent out really quickly. And instead of having people frantically working behind the scenes to get things done, maybe AI can take over those situations. I don't know if that's the exact application you were talking about for it, but I imagine that that's something it could go towards. It seems
No,
super
definitely.
interesting.
Yeah, using AI to do these tasks for us is very cool, but also a double-edged sword. So we should be pretty careful. This is where ethics comes into STEM. Again, very important interdisciplinary field for those of you interested.
Right.
I mean, yeah, as long as it's not cheating. It's like you said that we can just have like AI do our tests or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like a really interesting field that hopefully gets developed in the future. So yeah, overall, like dude, a lot of these fields are really interesting, and it also provides a lot of new jobs for people to try out for. And it's like, I think overall, it's going to be really helpful for the future for all of us to kind of just be able to delve into these topics. So yeah, again, thank you guys all so much for listening to all of our voices today. It's been a pleasure to have this podcast today. Thank you all very much.
See you guys
Thank you.
next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.